is like once you go through the ruptures where you've changed, people around you have changed, you do sit in a little bit of a wasteland for a minute
You do.
where you don't know what's going to happen next. So you might need to move on in your life and forge connections with people who are more aligned with who you are now. The people who are already in your life might change themselves and rise to the occasion to greet you and be with you where you are now. Or you might establish boundaries that allow relationships to be in homeostasis, but different than they were, previously. And we don't know how that is going to play out. It takes hard work and intention to move forward, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. But what you can establish for yourself is how you want to feel, and then use that as a compass.
Hi, I'm Kim,
And I'm Pancho,
and this is Now That You See It,
the show about the ideas hiding in plain sight,
the patterns underneath the patterns.
the stuff that quietly runs your life,
These are the conversations you can't stop thinking about,
and that you can't wait to send to a friend.
because once you see it,
You can't unsee it. Welcome,
hey, we have
everybody.
a guest episode.
Hello.
Oh, we're an old friend of the podcast before it was even a podcast. I think it's probably fair to say that, Noelle, you're the reason Kim and I know each other.
It's true.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
welcome.
Thank you. Do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do you want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself if people didn't get to listen to the first podcast episode we did with you?
Absolutely. But the way that I know Pancho and Kim, and they know each other, is I founded a beautiful little company called Lumia Coaching about 12 years ago. And we train life coaches. And these two amazing and miraculous humans are a product of that training program and also my friends. And so it is my deep pleasure to be here today and shoot the shit.
Yes, STS. We love those.
Yeah.
Great. Welcome.
Oh,
We're so pleased to have you back on. This is going to be a fantastic conversation because it's following a thread that we opened up in the first podcast,
Yep.
which was when you change, people get weird. And we'll talk about that, but there are so many angles to this. Noelle, I want to turn it back over to you to just say in your own words, what is the thing that you've seen that you can't unsee?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing to acknowledge for folks is that a lot of times when we as individuals change and we notice that there are little ruptures or disappointments or hurts or sorrows in our relational universe, we think it's us. We think that we are the problem. We feel sad. We feel that loss. But it is, especially in 2026, truly a universal thing that so many adults are facing and face continuously. And it's also relatively systemic right now in society for a lot of different reasons. And so if folks are listening and they're like, man, I'm resonating with this, you're not alone. This is normal. It's a normal part of life. Yeah.
We do love things to stay the same, even if they're not great for us. And when they change, it gets weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Machi,
We
you want to add anything? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
we were just, chit-chatting before we came on, and one of the things that I mentioned was this concept of imago. And imago is a way of looking at relationships through the binary lens, one person to one person. Um, as a queer old poly person and a multifaceted, multi-relational human, um, who works in the space of like coaching and friendships, coaching and colleague relationships, coaching and romantic relationships, coaching and family relationships. So much of what we know about relationships does apply to the broad spectrum of flavors, not just kind of what society holds up, which is typically romantic relationships, one partner to one partner. Um, so Imago looks at who we are when we were little and our unmet needs and the people that we wish we were and the things that we wish we had access to. And a lot of times as we grow up, we seek other people and relationships that we think are going to help us meet those needs, go to those places, be the people that we want to be. And then if we are successful and we become the selves that we want to become, we actually don't need the relationships in the same format anymore. Or something has happened where we get there and we're like, man, I really wanted to go to this particular party the whole time and this party sucks.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And then things change.
I, um, I remember us saying specifically the line that when you change, your friends get weird. And when we shared that with you in the last, it might have even been, pre-roll or after we stopped recording, Noelle, you really lit up and you said, "Oh yeah, I know that." Like that was a, like I fully grok what you're saying
Mhm.
moment for you. What comes to mind? Like what experiences or, either in coaching or in your life or maybe studies that you're familiar with come up when you hear that line when you change people get weird?
Well, I mean, as soon as I answer, I'm going to ask you both how many lives you've led. I've led like, I don't know, I might be on like 25 to date. Like,
Yeah.
I have changed and evolved so much over the course of 45 years. Um, and each life juggernaut was a different place and time with different people and different things that happened and different values and different priorities. And when I was in those spaces and places, especially in my early years, maybe my teens, maybe my 20s, they felt sacred. They felt like they were going to last forever. They felt like things were magical and they were always going to be the same. And then it changed. And it changed again. And it changed again. And it changed again. And there's no reasonable expectation that I can hold for things to stop changing.
Mhm.
And so just the reflection of a very dynamic life well lived has kind of led me to that assumption.
One of the things that comes up for me is, yes, when you change, people get weird, and that's a cute way of saying what for many people feels like when you change, the world explodes. Like, I think for a lot of folks, the anticipation of, "I can't do that because then I will experience, like, they'll be incredibly angry with me. They will think I'm a terrible person. I will think I'm a terrible person." Can you talk a little bit about, as you've lived your life, your 25 lives,
Yeah.
what some of the earlier life experiences were with change and how you reacted? And maybe, like, what's going on for you right now when you're like, "I gotta make a shift." What is it, how different does that look for you as a person right now?
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a really good friend of mine. We were talking about, where I am in my life, and she was talking about the people in my life, the people um I'm dating right now. And she's like, I love looking at where you're at. And one of the things that I know about you is that you're going to keep changing. And I want you to know that I will always honor where you go next.
Mm.
And that was the most beautiful affirmation of a friend who saw me and who sees me, consistently changing, especially in my work life and my relational life, right? Um, when I was younger, I think there was a a deeper sense of um, really feeling that belonging was sacred and that I would become part of a little crew for a period of time, for a chapter of my life. And I have such fond memories, like of just like really good times and the people and the places. And ultimately, the people and the places shifted. One, two, three, four of us moved on in the world, moved out into the world due to happenstance or a breakup or a move or a job. And the thing that was so precious and magical changed, right? Um, f- for me, it was a lot of, um, big ruptures. I got married,
Mm,
young, I got divorced young. I was a divorced person in my 20s, which
mm,
was that was probably one of the biggest when things change, your friends get weird. So, like, this was, like, still in the early 2000s, and I was in my 20s rolling around saying, "Yeah, I'm divorced," and people are like, "What?" Like,
what happened? Yeah.
"What? What's wrong with you?" Right?
Mhm.
Wrong with me, something was wrong with the marriage, like, clearly, or
Right.
but and so, that was a big one, and then I eventually went and pursued my PhD in human sexuality, and I was becoming, a sex therapist after I had gotten my life coaching certification, so it was like a one-two punch of things that people didn't understand. When I went to parties, I couldn't tell anybody what I did because it was just way too out there, And so then it was like, oh, you're a life coach studying to become a doctored sex therapist. And it was like, yeah, yeah, I am. And that academic juxtaposition caused some changes and rupturing in the little friend group that I was a part of because my priorities shifted and changed. I was never around during that period of time. God, I don't know how I fucking did it. I was working full time. I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get my PhD work done. Then I would go work a 9 to 5. I would go to class at night, and then I started building my company. So then from like 10 to midnight, I would work on the company. So things changed and people got weird because I was like, God, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Then I founded the company. And to everyone's chagrin, I dropped out of my free PhD program and moved across the country to Los Angeles to become a 36-year-old CEO in a startup with no business experience.
There you go.
Things changed and other people got weird,
Yeah.
namely my parents, like
Yeah.
and
Wow.
that's just, that's the middle of the story. That's not even so
Yeah.
those are some early highlight reels of like y- y- I followed my path.
Yeah. What for you just in your no, you know a lot of things. Like you
I know.
know a lot of things. What for you comes up as why people get weird? Like, of course we know that there's the sense of, you know, they disagree. But what else is going on here that causes it to be just so weird and just so uncomfortable for the person who is changing?
Well, it's the person who's changing and it's also the community surrounding them. Um Modern life doesn't have a container for this kind of transition. When we look at indigenous communities and indigenous practices, there were spaces and places and rituals to honor and acknowledge life transitions. Um, One of the earliest forms of life coaching that we know of is the role of a medicine person. When a human being, an adult, faces an inevitable crossroads where things have changed, they go out into nature, look for metaphors in nature, work with the medicine person to figure out who they are now and what they have to offer their community. And then they come back and present themselves to their community as a transformed being, as a new being, maybe taking on a new name. a new role within that community, and then they reintegrate into that community. The way that we've been sold the Coke commercial of life has been a static bill of goods.
Hmm.
Find the person, you get married, you get the white picket fence, have 2.5 kids, you stay in your structured career in a systemic environment, you put money into your 401k, and one day you die, right? So much fun. But that's not real. Like that's not the true nature of human evolution. And so I think there's friction when people sense that the conditions that the community holds are going to change because we are so interconnected and we are so important to each other. And we do rely on each other as much as we want to believe that we're toxic individuals. We are so interconnected. And so I think that's where it comes from is that fear of, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my position with my group, whether it's a family
Yeah.
group or relational group? Um, and how is this going to impact other people?
Yeah. 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 Pancho, yeah. I feel like you as somebody who on our podcast, we've talked about some of the differences in our respective personalities. And you, to me, it feels like are comfortable making values based decisions that people might be uncomfortable with. And if you can't do that, like it's just not worth being in that relationship. But there's consequences, there's collateral damage to that in terms of the relationships. What examples can you share of just being you in your life and letting things change?
Yeah. Yeah, thinking about I don't know what Noelle's dynamic is, and, I don't know you, Noelle, well enough to know what your dynamic is with people when you do start to change and, they feel some sort of way about it. But Kim, knowing you, I would think that you would be very careful about how it lands with those people, and you might be hesitant to make changes quickly or overtly. Um, Whereas I think I'm probably more on the side of the spectrum of like, fuck you, I'm changing, here we go. and
Yeah.
um and yeah, there have been a number of instances where I've done that. Um I've talked about it a lot, so I'm not sure there's a need to really get into it in depth, but when I decided to stop drinking alcohol, that was a good example of it. It's relatively recent. And yeah, it was an example of a situation where I saw something I could no longer unsee. I, to whatever degree it's true or not true, or, whether it loses the nuance of reality, I've really come to see alcohol as, I don't know, I'll just say it bluntly, as a force for evil in the world. I think it does far more damage than whatever good comes of it. And I think all of the good that comes from it is like a second degree good, right? Like the drinking of the alcohol itself isn't good. The fact that you get together with your friends when you're doing that, okay, that's good. Or the fact that, it gives you a tool with which you can celebrate or with which you can enact rituals. Those things are good, but you can substitute the alcohol out with something else that isn't literally poison, that doesn't disconnect your amygdala from your prefrontal cortex, that doesn't lead you to be a worse version of yourself. Like you literally go backwards in time.
Yeah.
You revert back to a less developed version of who you are with less self-awareness and less emotional intelligence. And that leads to a lot of really negative things. So I saw all of this, right? And I saw like, it happened in my life. My dad died when he was 33. And before that, he was physically, emotionally abusive to my mom. He was absent as a father figure. Um, and largely due to alcohol. And I saw it in how it was keeping a lot of the people that I related with stuck in patterns in their life that they saw as comfortable, fun, and I saw as like, well, you're kind of a functioning alcoholic who's 28, but you still act like you're 23. Um, you, there could be some good from not doing this anymore. Um, so I started talking to my friends about it, and I think rightfully they felt threatened and they felt judged. I was judging this
Mm,
thing, and it was very
mm,
early for me. So I hadn't quite found a way to judge it in a way where I did it in a way where, like, this is where I end and this is where you begin, and I'm going to take responsibility for myself and for my choices and my beliefs without having them encroach on who you want to be or what you choose to believe or what you think is right and wrong. So that it led to some uncomfortable conversations and friendship dynamics. I've since figured out how to do that in a more graceful way with healthier boundaries. But yeah, man, it got weird. It was it was like um people looking at me like, where is this coming from? Why are you all of a sudden asking me not to drink when we hang out? That's asking me to change the way I do my life. And, it led to other questions for my wife, who was then my fiance, like, well, will we just never hang out with our friends? Because a lot of the time we end up hanging out at a brewery or going out to eat and we have drinks. Or will I need to go and hang out with them without Pancho because he won't be there for that? It led to um a lot of reassessing of what it was going to mean for me to do that.
Something's coming up for me.
mm,
What's up?
The word bias.
Oh
And
mm.
yeah.
bias is such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking about it. It's on my mind because I was redoing coursework for person-centered coaching today. And person-centered coaching looks at our own capacity for self-determination and our own right to choose our path in life and know who we are, know who we want, and have the right to discover that truly. And as
Yeah.
a coach in training, we have to be aware of our own biases, and biases in so many ways equate to values and learning, and we assign values to certain things and then develop both assumptions and biases for and against certain things. And so if a given
Yeah.
person says drinking equals friendship, that's actually a bias, right? Or even in my case, the word divorce. When I was so young, when I was in my 20s, and I would say I'm divorced, a lot of people had a bias. Well, what's wrong with you as a partner? What's wrong with you as a woman? What's wrong with you as a wife? Now that I say that I'm twice divorced, hey, like it's but this is, and it has to do with how we were raised, the cultures that we live in, the way we were assimilated. And so to our point of like, when we change, things get weird. So much of it comes down to meaning making. Well, this
Uh,
means that, when it doesn't necessarily, but there's that underlying assumption.
totally. And there's nothing wrong with having biases.
No, they're
Like they're
not.
actually they're quite useful.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, are they biases that actually line up with the person you want to be, and have you taken the time to take a look at them? And I fully own, yeah, like everything I just said about alcohol and its role in the world as almost like an entity unto itself. That's ridden with bias, and I've taken the time to think about, do I believe these things? And yes, I do. And will other people believe those things? No, but quite likely the majority of people I come across won't understand where I'm coming from. Um, and and I think that that's kind of the interesting gray zone to walk, both as a coach, because as a coach, I have to completely set that stuff aside to show up for the person I'm coaching. But as a person out in the world, I have to hold it, but then also still, if I want to have graceful interactions with people, still allow people to be on their own trajectory, living their own lives, coming to their beliefs in their own time, whatever that might look like.
Absolutely. And I think it's that non-judgmental stance. Like if in our own relationships, every single person out there, we're a trained coach and we greeted every single person in our life with, oh, wow, you have the right of absolute self determination. You've seen this thing for yourself. You want to make this change. I'm going to be curious about who you become and love you anyway. That is not the way it goes. I mean, that's the ideal, that's the aspirational state for us as humans, but that's typically not the way it works because
Yeah.
it's really hard to put your biases aside and actually just let somebody be them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking a lot about from a clinical or therapy perspective, like family systems therapy, and just how when one person is usually identified as like either the golden child or the stabilizer or the problem child, when and they're both problem childs for different reasons. You know, the golden child being the person who's like uh, sort of absorbing all of the family's projections of good, and that's a lot to hold for one person. Like that's a very rigid, inescapable role. The quote unquote problem child being the one who's probably like, I'm going to express your rigidity of me in problematic ways, whatever it ends up being. But when either of these people start to quote unquote get better, understand boundaries, exist in a way that makes others feel it just is different, you get the whole system destabilizes. So it's not just like people are, yes, there might be the anger, the grief, the like the projections of these feelings onto the people who are changing. There's very likely a whole new set of problems that arises from the system destabilizing as people change. And as Pancho, you said, none of us are, especially when we're first figuring this out, it is messy. It is not super graceful. It is, it is saying like unpracticed things. It's sort of what's on your mind. You're doing your best. You're going to offend people. In 20 years, you might have said it differently. So yeah, it's going to be messy. But there's a whole new set usually of problems that arise that sort of detract from the root level stuff. Like in my own life, as like I sort of exited this dynamic in my family, the destabilizing system pushed one of the members in my family into like deep addiction, and because it was too stressful to hold. And so that took a while for that new problem to sort of like peak enough for it to be addressed. And then when that happened, there was another one. And like we've been through cycles of um, these sort of emergent phenomenon, like in true systems theory, when something gets too soon, like this is all emergent, it's all organic, until we were able as like a family system to hit our new baseline. It's not the way we were, but it very much is a new kind of stability where in general people are responsible sort of for themselves, and there's a care about the unit, but for the most part it's we've all grown because a couple of us have said, I'm going to exit like codependency, I'm going to exit triangulation, I'm going to exit the sort of toxic dynamics and let the system spin out until we reach a new baseline. And that mush, that chaos before the calm is horrifying. You have no idea that you're going to land. You are Dorothy in a tornado. Where are we going? Doesn't feel like the yellow brick road. And like, will we land? Who knows? But it's been one of the most profound lessons of my like adult life to say that when you are in the absolute, like, this can't get any worse chaos, like, there's a landing right around the corner. It's not perfect, it's not super peaceful, but it's a new baseline, and you'll get, like, a reprieve.
Yeah, I agree. As I was listening to you, an interesting analogous thread was coming up for me, and that's Reiki. In,
Oh, huh.
in energy work, similar to the way you were describing systems work, like when
Yeah,
energy that's not yours is removed, you'll feel an emptiness. It'll feel uncomfortable. It'll feel physically uncomfortable in your body and your being. And then the idea is, well, maybe you can consciously or intentionally refill
yeah,
yourself, right? So even thinking about like the absence of codependence, that can feel weird. It can feel like something is missing. The absence of alcohol can feel weird, you know? It can feel like something's missing. The absence of an energy can feel like a loss. But then there's that intentionality of, well, what do I want instead? And that's
yeah,
neuroplasticity. I mean, that's Margaret Moore, neuroplasticity all day. Think, feel, experience. What do you want instead?
yeah. What came up for you,
Kim,
Pancho? Yeah,
so I
oh,
was
yeah,
just
go ahead.
wondering,
Mm,
Noelle's talked about kind of how people have gotten weird in her life when she's changed, and I just shared a story
mm, mm.
about my experience. But like I said, this was originally your idea of a topic. So what's there for you? What's an example of a time when you changed and the people around you got weird?
Man, I got stories. Yeah, and I don't know, like, to sort of protect the innocent, I'll, like, anonymize them a bit, but just in a I'll share, like, one very light one, just as an example, and then a heavier one. The very light one is one of my kids sees me making them food and feeding them on demand as, like, the ultimate act of love. If mommy doesn't
On
do that,
demand.
she doesn't love me. I'm abandoned.
But
We had
but
to
the
work on
key
that.
the key term
Yeah,
there is on
oh, it's on
demand.
demand. Yeah,
Fuck.
I know. So,
Okay.
um, they're really like, I really had to work hard on this one of like, I will I okay, I'm your parent and you are like late elementary student. Like you can expect me to make you meals. Fine. We'll do breakfast, lunch, dinner. Anything else outside of that, you gotta provide on your own, including glasses of water for the love of God. You know how to do this. And like when I'm feeling generous, I will like happily reach over and get you a glass of water, but like, mm-mm. And yeah, it was uh, when I stopped taking orders for food at any point, there was there were riots. There were real like meltdowns. And it's not because my kid's a bad kid. It's not because I'm doing something wrong. It's because that for them had developed into for many reasons. Cause I love providing for my children. I love honestly like one of my favorite sounds in the world is literally the sound of their little mouth moving, eating the food I've made them. So, like, it's mutual. I love this too, but it was, like, excessive, and I felt like servant mom, and I'm not doing that anymore. So, yeah, we had to work with, like, this is this is the way I'm going to love you now is to teach you life skills, and the life skill of providing yourself your own freaking snack. Like, you can do this. You have options. And so that's one, and, like, we worked through it. But that's, like that experience happens for lots of people of, "This is how I am loved. The way you are is how I am loved. If you stop doing that, I am no longer loved," especially in an attachment relationship, parent-child or, like, your spouses or just, like, anyone you're close to. And, helping people navigate that experience of like, oh, you've changed the way you express love in a way that helps them see like there's a new way coming as opposed to I don't love you anymore or there's a new way to love yourself has been helpful. Um, on the heavier side, like one of my like lifelong closest relationships, I was always the person who, this other person was often really, really emotionally dysregulated and said and did things that were not okay. And then also would then apologize after. And it was a cycle. It was a cycle of rupture, repair, rupture, repair, rupture, repair, rupture, repair. And because the person like would often say they're sorry, I was like, okay, they said they're sorry. They got it. And my interrupt the pattern change was um not no longer enabling that cycle and calling it out and saying, thank you for the apology. This wasn't okay. This can't happen again. I didn't like it. As opposed to, it's okay. Like it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
And just me saying, you know what, that really sucked. I really didn't like that. It was that was caused. So, and I knew this would happen because this is the pattern. Massive, more emotional dysregulation. That for so long I was like, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm not going to. And I had to accept that this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And that was the hard part is not only do people get weird, in general, things suck a lot before they get a lot better. Like it's a down up, it's a bounce at the bottom and to the top because your change is sort of an implicit accusation, a
Yeah.
mirror. It's the stuff, it's showing up the stuff that they don't want to hold, but it's just a reflection of them and their shame, as opposed to you just having healthy boundaries and trying to teach people how to love you. And because I didn't really have that skill set to understand the difference, I thought if someone's reacting poorly, I must be doing poorly. I must be poor. I must be bad. So separating those things and knowing that like the reaction doesn't change the truth was like, that's my thing I can't unsee is their reaction doesn't change your truth. They're going to get weird. So
Yeah.
those are my
That
examples.
Thank you, Kim. That was like beautiful and so important that the reaction doesn't change the truth. I think for you, for me, for Pancho, right? It doesn't change the truth. There's a next part that I think is important to address. Is like once you go through the ruptures where you've changed, people around you have changed, you do sit in a little bit of a wasteland for a minute
Yeah, you do.
where you don't know what's going to happen next. So you might need to move on in your life and forge connections with people who are more aligned with who you are now. The people who are already in your life might change themselves and rise to the occasion to greet you and be with you where you are now. Or you might establish boundaries that allow relationships to be in homeostasis, but different than they were, you know, previously. And we don't know how that is going to play out. It takes hard work and intention to move forward, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. But what you can establish for yourself is how you want to feel, and then use that as a compass
Mm.
to measure, is this person somebody that I want to stay by my side? Is this a relationship that needs a boundary? Is this relationship expired? Do I need to cultivate new relationships?
And that compass feeling feels so important to emphasize of how do you want to feel eventually? And how do you feel with this person, situation, relationship, whatever it ends up being in the moment? Because, and I can't emphasize this enough, that moment of wasteland is the time when you doubt yourself the most that this was wrong. Because you just also stepped out of your own homeostatic system, the thing that, for better or for worse, was staying the same. And so the patterns around you are changing. That is the time when people go, oops, I made a mistake and backpedal. And so staying with the wasteland feeling long enough to just like, because you're in that moment, your amygdala is firing, your prefrontal cortex is bathed in chemicals that tell you to fight, flight, freeze, fawn, get the fuck out. I mean, like, pick your F. And then you can be at risk for backsliding, which is so frustrating, but also so human.
So
And so
human.
it feels like that compass moment that you describe is like particularly important for when you're in the like, oh my God, what did I just do feeling.
Another piece that I think is important to register is that, like, in America, uniquely, we've been socialized that we're supposed to be happy all the time.
Mm.
Like, it's not like that in the rest of the world. Melancholy is an acceptable state, and sometimes things are just blah. It's not an indicator.
That's such a good point.
It's not an indicator of, there's no alarm flashing if things are
Yeah.
just want want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is life, right?
This is life. I was having that reflection today where I was in like a want space and context. My second marriage was finalized. The divorce was finalized about a year ago, and then another 12-year relationship also ended. And so my a lot of the intimate spaces in my life are empty right now.
Mm.
And I was sitting with that emptiness, and I was asking myself, like, did I make mistakes? And then what do I want? And then I was like, no, no, I didn't make mistakes, but I do have the responsibility to fill my life up in ways forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to turn the tables on this. We continue talking about this as us being the agents of change. We are the ones who are changing.
Well,
The people around us are the ones getting weird in response to the fact that we've now moved the cheese. But the reality is, we're sometimes the ones who get
Uh,
to involuntarily deal with the fact that somebody else is changing.
mm,
And then we get weird.
yeah.
And so I was thinking about I was thinking about this a little earlier and I wrote it down, but a great example of that is there are two things that came to mind in terms of what causes that to happen. But a great example of that is politicians. We expect our politicians to just be the static version of the person we voted for when we voted for them. And the two things that came to mind are one, I think there's something having to do with identity tied up in it.
Mhm.
I am this kind of person. I identify with these kinds of people. The moment the people I identify with start changing and getting real weird and like doing things that I've never even considered, let alone agree with, that can be a threat to one's own sense of identity. And like, well, who am I now in relation to these people that used to serve as a mirror that confirmed my identity back to me?
Yep.
And then the other one is kind of more on the neuroscience side of it, the fact that our brains are essentially predictive processors.
Mhm. Mm.
They don't just receive information about the world. It, the brain is using everything it knows about your past experiences, about your surroundings, all contextual clues to predict what's going to happen next. And when something happens that is a surprise, that goes against what your brain assumed would happen next, that doesn't feel good. So if you've been presented with somebody who always enables your codependency, who always, does one thing or another, and then they show up differently, maybe they show up even in a completely opposite way to the way they've shown up in the past, neurologically, that is destabilizing. Um, and when that happens at scale, that can be the kind of thing that, in much the same way that somebody you identify with changing threatens your your sense of identity, something that is really fundamental to your worldview changing threatens your sense of security in terms of I live in a world that I can predict and that leaves me feeling
Mm.
safe about the life I'm living into. So that's
It's a
what came to mind.
it's a
Go ahead.
two-way street. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
so what does one do when there's I mean, this kind of goes back to the episode we talked about in terms of, dealing with unwanted change, Kim. But it's specifically, how do you deal with unwanted change in the people around you who are important enough to like piss you off when they start changing?
I mean, that's that bias piece, right? I mean, that's the self-determination piece is can we look at the people in our lives as constantly evolving conscious beings who are generative? Or do we hold some version of currency associated with who this person is in the world?
Yeah.
What it does for you?
You know, I had a partner who started transitioning when I was dating them, and it's, like, that's a whole mood, is you are going into a relationship thinking one thing, and then your partner decides, you know, "This actually isn't who I am. You didn't know this, but things are gonna change."
Yeah.
And it was I give them so much credit for the grace, and it was just, like, a really beautiful transition, and I think both of us handled it well, but in part because I think we both came back to there's no point in stifling truth, like, what's already there, and that would be ass backwards. Like, that's gonna bite us both, and just keep coming back to this person is becoming more and more themselves. And that takes it's I don't share that story to be like, "I'm so enlightened." It's more to say it's more to say, like, it's a choice. It was a choice in for both of us to say, "This is something that is gonna challenge us, and what matters both to us is it is futile to fight emerging truth." Like, it's the dandelion coming up through the cracks in the sidewalk, it's coming out.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful little garden that baby's gonna be someday, because not even concrete can push that down.
Yeah.
And it brings to the mind the idea that this is I was gonna ask you, Noelle and Pancho, one of the hardest parts of that for them, but also in general, like, not just for that example, this happens to me all the time and to people all the time, is the fear of changing out of an identity or a role or a way of being or like things that you were really, really tied to, vocal about that, like, no, I am this, I believe this, I do this. And then the evidence mounts and you're like, ah, the facts have changed. So therefore, so do my opinions. That that is a heroically challenging move in many cases, and I'm wondering if you either of you have examples of, like, when have you changed your opinion in a way that was really like, "Wow, that was hard, that wasn't easy. What happened? What do people do?" Opinion or identity or presentation, yeah, that was
Yeah.
stark.
I mean, I like two things. Something that's um one of the places and spaces where I see this kind of interpersonal change happening a lot is in business partnerships or yeah, in business partnerships where you go into something with like the best intentions and then one person's like, I don't want to do this anymore. and
Yeah, yeah. I signed up for it, and also now I
And
changed
also
my
and
mind.
it's such a gut punch because 'cause you've been working so hard. It's like, "Oh, god damn it," like, "Ah," right? There's so much, like, loss, but it's almost normalized in that space where people are, given a kind of a pass of like, "Yeah, things change, things happen." Sometimes people take it really personally, but I think by and large, that's one space where that change happens a lot and people's lives go on and they just kind of, accept it. Um, One of the spaces that I've been spending a lot of time exploring recently is post second wave feminism. Yeah. And the what I'm seeing right now in terms of popular expressions of female empowerment, and I'm starting to question, to what extent have we disenfranchised male-bodied people unfairly, and to what extent has our society actually been polarized by social media? Maybe not even by real humans, but maybe by agent actors, right?
Yeah.
To sow more and more and more discontent, dysphoria, and disenfranchisement between groups of people, be they men, women, left, right, different nation states. And so that's one of the things that I've been thinking about is what's happening in the echo chamber and how
Yeah.
have concepts and theories truly gotten distorted and what has it done to society? I don't have an answer, but it's a big thought project for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
We're
It's
talking. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Pancho.
I was gonna say it's either coincidental or somehow telling an important data point that when Kim asked, "What is something that you've had to change your mind about?" the first thing that came to mind for me was my perspective of the experience of being a woman or of just not being a male or man presenting individual in society. And I don't know that I'm in, like I'm taking it on as a research project, which is kind of sounds like what you're doing, Noelle, which is a superpower you have. Um, but it's almost like a slow chipping away of preconceived notions or a very myopic perspective through consistent exposure. And yeah, it's fascinating to think about what I thought about or what my perspectives were on men and women and all of the disparities there 20 years ago and where I sit with those now. Um yeah,
Oh,
coaching.
can you say more? Double click.
Yeah. We could double click on that. So
Cool.
a good example, like me at 19, dating as an economist, having read Freakonomics, the book that said the wage disparity between men and women, though from an ethical perspective, could be wrong, from an economist's perspective, kind of makes sense. Because when somebody's thinking about how much do I pay this person, with somebody who's able to birth children and has to take time away to birth children and do that whole thing that only somebody with a body that can do that can do. Well, okay, you like looking at just the finances and probability figures, it makes sense, right? Um, Is that right? Is that wrong? Is that the kind of society we want to live in? Do we want to have the invisible hand be the thing that dictates the price tag on everything? Those are different questions. But the question is, okay, well, according to the theory of just economics and balances in economics, supply demand balances, market corrections, whether firms will self regulate or not, all of that stuff, there's an argument there. So and having had a girlfriend who was in some sort of social studies major in college, bringing that up, that basically was the beginning of the end of our very short relationship. Um, because I couldn't get away from the perspective of, well, in a way, this makes sense. And she couldn't step outside of, okay, well, ethically, this is fucked up. And allowing that argument into the conversation is just damaging like my efforts or our efforts as a society to progress. um so that was then. And and then I think, I mean, my wife has been really great in this. And you heard me talking about my views on alcohol. When I talk about the things that I believe in, I am very firm. I use big terms. If I'm not careful, I will use absolutes, which I'm actually very opposed to using. in talking about things. I won't, if I catch myself, I won't use words like always or never. And she helps me notice when I am doing those things, and helps me refine what I'm thinking so that it comes out in a way that's true to how I actually, to what I actually believe. And then finally, over the last year and a half, coaching women in business places dominated by old white guys. I can't unsee it.
Oh,
It's
wow.
not that it's anybody's fault. It's a system, and it's a system in which oftentimes everyone is trying to help everyone, and everyone's trying to do what's right. But the system itself, like when you walk into a boardroom meeting and all of the people who have the most authority or the most power in that meeting are old white guys, something happens psychologically. Just the way that we're social animals, we think about where do I belong? Where do I not belong? And you look for cues to inform those views of where do I belong and not belong. If that room is full of people who don't look like you, it's gonna be hard to not form a narrative that you don't belong in that room, even if it's a subconscious one. It's gonna be
Yeah.
hard to not have the emotions or the bodily feeling of I'm out of place here, even if you really want to believe that everything you did warrants that you should be there, and they are all happy to have you there. They actually did what it took to get you into that room, right? They fast tracked you through a promotion track or whatever it is. No amount of of intellectual thinking about it is going to um, address these other things that are happening at a different level of the being that you are, kind of, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, or somatics, what it's like to be in your body. Or another one that came off the Dartmouth, I think it's Dartmouth scar experiment. Am I remembering? Is it at Dartmouth?
I
The
think so.
experiment
Yeah.
where they would put scars on people's faces. Well, first control, go out into public, see what that's like. Come back. We'll have professional makeup artists put a scar on your face. Go out into public again and see what that's like. It's a very different experience. And then come back and report on that. And then, under the pretext of touching up the scar, they would remove the scar, and they would send those people back out into public again, thinking they still had the scar on their face. And they would come back and report, oh, yeah, like I'm still being treated weird. It's still weird to be out there with the scar on my face. It's very different from what it was like before I had the scar, but the scar is no longer on their face.
They've
But
internalized the bias.
they're carrying
Yeah.
the experience of what that was like. And so that's the thing, right? Like women carry that a lot. Well, even they're VPs, they're in, C-suite meetings. They still carry the entire lived experience of being like the baby in the room who also happens to be a girl, and everybody kind of talks over them or discredits their opinion, all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I think as a man, I've never had to deal with that. Even as a Mexican person, I've never had to deal with that to that degree, maybe partially because I'm white passing. And so yeah, it's been this like gradual journey of layering on more and more nuance to radically change. I actually still believe that, like, okay, if we want to have our economy work under certain premises, it makes sense that women don't get paid as much as men because they're going to drop out of the workforce. But that's a very myopic view. I can
I see.
Noah, you can disagree with me. That's fine. Um,
Bias.
I I see the argument from a robotic economist's perspective.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty bald assumption that somebody's gonna drop out of the workforce, first of all. Like,
Totally, totally, totally. So like, feel free to challenge it. I still see where they're coming from, and I'm not enough of an expert to say that's true or not true, or that's but I can say I want to live in a world where that's not the deciding factor on who makes what amount of money. Um, but I mean, the way that I just said it, like there's nuance to all of this, and then there's also the fact that I'm limited in my knowledge and expertise, and um, and I could always be wrong, and error blindness would mean that I have no idea that I'm wrong.
Yeah. I think this is honestly, we talked about imposter syndrome 2 podcasts ago, and it was great, but this is why imposter syndrome is a very complicated concept to me, 'cause some it's sometimes very much not imposter syndrome. It's the environment tells me, validates that, like, I don't
Yeah,
belong. Like, I'm not making this up. I am not making this up.
yeah.
I thought of one more thing that I've changed my mind on.
What?
Was anybody gonna follow on Pancho's very great points?
I mean, I have a lot of
So,
thoughts, but we do that on another podcast.
Yeah.
no,
Okay. Round 3.
if you could give the TLDR, because I do think that like it's worthwhile, right? Like it's worthwhile to give
Yeah.
it some dimensionality from somebody else who's considered this kind of thing,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
likely far more deeply than I have. What are some of the, like top 2 or 3 thoughts that, if you could say them quickly, came to mind about what I shared?
Yeah, I mean, so the economic lens that you're looking through is largely
Yeah.
US, right? So you're making a lot of assumptions about a very specific culture, and you're not looking at the way that that culture was specifically socially engineered post World War II to set up people in schools to behave as if they're in factories, and then to have family systems units post World War II where there's a nuclear family, mother at home, binary situation. The rest of the world isn't like that. There are expansive economic models that don't rely on looking at a worker's longevity and more so look at, value and worth and like point productivity in terms of like, so looking at like if I work for an hour, my hour is going to be worth more than somebody else's hour, regardless of gender, because it's me, right? Looking at me as a human with a uterus doesn't actually give you any information about the quality of work, what I'm capable of, what the value of that 1 hour is. I'm also a childless person who has never left the workforce since age 11, right? Um, who owns a company who participates in the economy that creates jobs, job pipelines. So now, like, let's talk about worth, right?
Totally.
Like, sincerely, like, it's based on faulty logic that doesn't take into account a whole lot of other possible factors, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah, I
it's
don't
also, it
disagree with any
reminds
of
me
that.
of, like, environmentalism of, like, you don't count the externalities of waste, of, like, how it affects the system. Like, we don't price in the effect of, environmental dysregulation on when we cost out a good, because we're not noticing the long-term or downstream costs of pollution, of, just name it. Similarly, we don't cost out the added benefit to the economy when there are, and, like, the wages that are due and earned, but, like, not actually paid to people who are providing care, who are allowing other people to work more, who are da 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 da, name it, but are just they're unpaid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're adding benefit, they're just not getting a paycheck.
Right.
Yeah.
To reinforce the social engineering of the system that's based on
Yeah.
a white supremacist patriarchal culture that keeps intersectional difference at a lower level.
Amen.
Wait,
Go ahead.
yeah, you're right. No, this is a black hole, and like maybe it's a black hole we should go down. Um, but yeah, it's wild what you just said, Kim. It's wild to think that motherhood is such a valuable thing for anyone to do in society,
Yeah.
and that it goes completely unpaid.
Yeah. My sister she's had 2 babies who were born at, like, 24 weeks, like, about a pound each,
Mm.
different times, and my mom happens to be a pulmonary nurse, and like, one of them had, like, lung issues. She was able to get Medicaid to pay for her to come up and be her granddaughter's nurse, like a caretaker
Oh,
for a
cool.
while, which was cool. And it was like this big, the whole family was like, oh my God, look at this thing we figured out how to do. Like, this is crazy. Like, what black magic? And we were like, this is insane. This
Yeah.
is like, why did we have to go through such red tape to like invent this? I mean, we didn't invent it, but why did this have to be so hard, not talked about, such a stretch when this is exactly how it should all work? Is
Right.
like caretaking should be paid, and in many cases it
Right.
can be, and it is, but often not.
Yeah.
I mean, like honestly, like ownership, land ownership, um, is smack in the middle of it. Like looking at the United States territories and how different economic systems were set up for trade that were different economies. And then when colonization began to happen, it was all based on fences and land and ownership and who could own things. Only white men. Only white men could own things, could have money in their name, could have land. Then slavery came along, then indentured servants were pitted against slaves. Women were still practically considered chattel at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whole podcast,
The whole
entire podcast about this. Oh, can I leave us with something that like, and it's a nice like tie a bow around it, but one of the things that I have changed my opinion on, and this will strike fear in the heart of high achieving folks whose worth is tied to their productivity and excellence. If you're an Enneagram type 3, like cover your ears. Um, but the good enough job, the like
Yep.
mediocrity. My sister and I were just talking about this. I know. I'm all about it because I choose what I'm going to be excellent at, and I can't be excellent at everything. And I need to, and it's not just like a static thing, it's just in the moment. What is the thing I'm going to invest in and actively let other things be shitty, be at best mediocre, including like entire jobs where you need to show up for, if you're a caretaker, you need to show up for whoever you're taking care of, or like a different job. Like I've got two, and I really want coaching to be just amazing for these clients. And so I'm doing other things like not as much. Like right now, my kids are like Lord of the Fliesing it. They're self-governing at the moment. Like this is not great parenting, but that's okay because like in the name of teaching independence, like they'll figure it out. But it in terms of like when you change, people get weird. When you stop trying to be excellent at everything, the people who get the short straw on that one are like,
Yeah.
what the
So,
fuck?
oh,
So what,
yeah.
how come I'm not the thing you chose?
Yeah.
Wait, I'm the thing that got let go? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a hard one.
Um, yeah.
Mediocrity, baby. The new
Hey,
black.
it's it's a nice place to be welcome.
Hmm.
Slowness.
Yeah. Yeah. Had to just like do okay and be fine with that because somewhere else is getting your best and it's the right place to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a
Mm.
colleague, little people at home, and we were working our asses off. And one day she rolled into the office and just looked like hell. And I was like, "What's up?" And she was like, "Sometimes cereal is okay for dinner."
Yeah. Solid. Solid.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ooh. We could wrap it on that. Sometimes cereal is okay for dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. Noel, thank you
Mediocrity.
so much.
So
Yeah.
welcome. So
So
welcome.
appreciated. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
So
do
much
it
fun.
again. And it sounds like the next one is gonna be Pancho goes down a black hole. But
Yes.
we, you know,
Let's go spelunking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's all do it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Noelle. This was just such a gift of time. Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a great night. Bye.